Kol nidrei ve'yesarei ve'kinuyei ve'chonamei ve'chonamei dine darno.
I'm old. I'm tired. I'm sick. Dying. The doctors tell me. At the end of my story. The picture you may have of me. Mama Golda, who makes chicken soup for her soldiers. It's a nice picture. I do make chicken soup. But let's empty it all out for keeps right now. At the bottom of the pot is blood. At the bottom of the pot is a question that won't die. I can do without that music. When my husband Morris and I first sailed to Palestine, spring 1921, 24 of us on a boat, and the crew voted a strike. Sabotage. They mix seawater in the drinking water. They even tried to burn the ship, so the captain throws them in irons. In return, they threw him overboard. And on dry land, Morris says to me, 24 young idealists sailing off to utopia. And below deck, human nature doing everything it can to sink the ship. Which, as Prime Minister 52 years later, I remember, starting with a phone call, woke me up 4 o'clock in the morning. Saturday, Yom Kippur. Yes, what? Oh, no. I knew it yesterday in my bones. Look, we'll meet, 6 a.m. Tell the others, my generals. Half of my cabinet generals, and not one of them could smell yesterday that today it's war. And when we meet in my office, Dado, my chief of staff, says, I want a full mobilization for counterattack. But Moshe Dayan, our minister of defense, says, no. Again, the word we call us the aggressor. Dado says, I also want a first strike. Hit them before they hit us. Moshe Dayan says, no. We'll be condemned everywhere. Get no help from anyone. How does a housewife decide between generals? Okay, I'm not a housewife. I say, Moshe, the mobilization must be as Dado wants. And I say, Dado, Moshe is right. In 1 week, we will need help. And from the Americans. Simcha Dinitz, our ambassador, just home from Washington, comes in. I ask, Simcha, how soon can you fly back? Golda, it's Yom Kippur. Nothing's moving. You are to Cyprus. The military will fly you. The American ambassador Keating, getting back to me. Well, Mr. Ambassador, our neighbors are calling on us today with Soviet tanks. I have one message for Washington. We can strike first. And won't. Can and won't. I promise, won't. But Mr. Ambassador, we were promised 48 F-4 Phantoms. Thank you. Simcha, the minute you see Kissinger, your first point is, where are the Phantoms? Saturday morning, Yom Kippur, all this in the opening hour. And for lunch, citizens of Israel, ordeal by battle has been forced on us again. The Israel Defense Forces, our sons, have entered the fight for our independence, our freedom, our survival. Our survival. Survival is maybe a synonym for Jewish The very first thing I remember is my father, a carpenter in Kiev, nailing boards across a door to keep out a pogrom. In those days, pogroms were, the fashionable thing. Mobs running through the streets with knives and clubs, screaming, "Christ killers!" as they hunted us down. And Jews everywhere, mourning, wearing black, fasting. My big sister Shana and I are fasting too. My mother scolds Shana.
A fine example you set for her every day in black.
I say,
Mama, it's for the children they killed.
Gewalt, even your doll you're dressing in black? I Golda, you got a dibuk in you? I have a dibuk, yes. A little devil. Over and over in me it says, live. So send the young to die. It has 2 tongues, this dibuk. More life, more death. Boys dying out there this minute. And my husband Morris would say, such an irony, Golda. All your life given for a state, and only here could we be wiped out. You dreamed of a paradise. What went wrong? The first days after Yom Kippur are a nightmare. I live in my office on coffee and cigarettes. I sleep on the couch. My assistant Lou comes in, brings me clothes, and says,
My dear lady, you cannot conduct this work properly without a fresh suit.
And day and night, I'm on the phone, or I'm in meetings, or trudging down to the war room to sweat over the maps with Dado. He says Golan is not good. The main thrust is here. At least 400 Syrian tanks. How many of ours? The Barak Brigade is down to 20. 20? Is this bad enough? No. Our Minister of Defense comes back from the Suez. Moshe Dayan, a very busy lover. You know, I always wondered, did he take the eye patch off? Also, a hero. Under all those bullets, never afraid, but now, back from the Suez, he is pale as death.
Golda, we're losing planes very fast.
To Egyptians?
No, to Soviet missiles.
Brezhnev's surface-to-air missiles are blowing our pilots out of the sky. You are telling me what, Moshe? That the whole front is collapsing?
Yes, shorten our lines. We cannot push the Egyptians back now. If we try it and fail, the fate of Israel is at stake.
The fate of Israel. I go back to my office, stupefied. Lou comes in with a tray full of supper.
Ooh, you look gray.
I think I'm going out of my senses. Diane says it's a catastrophe. Retreat. I'll kill myself first. If we lose this war, I will kill myself, yes?
I have here only soup, not poisonous enough. And you cannot kill yourself before the election.
After the votes, yes. So I don't. I call a cabinet meeting, which I will never forget. October 8th, 6 p.m. at this very table. Alan, Lior, Galili, Dado, and Dayan expecting the end of the Third Temple. The First Temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. The Second, by the Romans. The Third, never built. We are the Third Temple. This meeting with all our wisest heads, and others I won't name, up from the bowels of the earth in the Negev, turns into the darkest night of my life. At this meeting, it goes on till dawn. At this meeting, at this table, we discuss Dimona. No, I'm not ready to talk about that. Well, I dreamed of a paradise. So what went wrong? Only what a traveler returning to Vienna told the founder of Zionism.
But Mr. Herzl, there are Arabs in Palestine.
Yes, our cousins. Blood cousins if you go all the way back to Abraham. But now, two peoples, only one piece of land. And they thought they'd seen the last of us. They didn't want the backwash of the world drifting back in. Why, at the United Nations, the Iraqi foreign minister shook his finger at me and shouted,
Mrs. Meir, go home to Milwaukee.
I was backwash from Russia. Although Milwaukee is where I grew up and fell in love with Zion, with Morris. To Milwaukee came a Jew named Ben Gurion, and he told about the pioneers in Palestine. He'd been expelled by the Turks and was now recruiting for the Jewish Brigade to fight with the British against the Turks and free Palestine for Jews to settle. He said,
The Jewish homeland must be a model for the redemption of the human race.
I was young. It seemed reasonable. What didn't seem reasonable was that after graduating first in my class from the 8th grade, my bossy mother said I couldn't go on to the Milwaukee High School, that I had to come work in our family store. So, late one night, I lowered my suitcase out of my bedroom window, and I got on a train bound for Denver to live with my beloved sister Shayna and her husband. In Shayna's kitchen, I met her whole crowd of Jews in Denver for their tuberculosis. Zionists, anarchists, socialists, and among them, Morris Meyerson. Not very handsome. I wrote my best friend in Milwaukee, but he has a beautiful soul. And then it turned out Shayna was just as bossy as my mother. Runs in the family, I hear. For me, they use a fancier word. Intransigent. So, I walked out on Shayna, got a job sewing skirt linings, and I rented a room of my own at 16. Intransigent? Is that why I sent Barlab to the front for a third opinion? He's another general. Although I do keep Dayan off TV. Because, he says, Golda, in 2 days we've lost 10% of our air force. And who knows how many hundreds of tanks. We are not fighting for the Sinai now. It's for the third temple. Moshe, do me a favor.
Yes, what?
Don't go on TV tonight. You'll be terrible for morale. More pleasant things. Denver, when I was 17. Young and full of innocent hopes. Morris I saw a lot of. He didn't care much for politics, but he knew all about poetry, art, music. He took me to free concerts in the park and to lectures on philosophy, literature. He read me the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And thou beside me in the wilderness were paradise. When I finally had to go back to Milwaukee, my father begged me. Morris asked me to marry him. I was too young, but he said he would wait. And meanwhile, we wrote all the time. I can do without that music. Back in Milwaukee, Zionism also filled my head now, and with it, my whole life made sense. Zionism was my whole life. And when Morris finally came to visit me, I said, I'm the happiest person alive. Goldie, by letter is no way. I'm tired of living with you in a mailbox. I felt the same. I want us to be married now. And my mother walked in. Mama, this is Morris Meyerson from Denver.
And what does he do for a living?
I'm a sign painter, Mrs. Mabovich.
Mr. Goodstein has a real estate office.
Who was Mr. Goodstein? An old man who wanted to marry me. Morris was jealous. How old? Old. Almost 30. Goldie, Schubert, when he died, left $11. Morris, money isn't the thing. Of course not. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediment. What? Goldie, the sonnets, Shakespeare, they were very high on that list I sent you. The list, oy vey. Morris, that list was so long. And then my father walked in, shaking a handful of leaflets and hollering, Goldie, Papa, this is a spectacle you're making of me. Morris Meyerson, no daughter of Moshe Mabovich, on the soapbox outside the synagogue is making speeches. Papa, in the synagogue they don't let me talk. When you're a man, you'll talk in the synagogue, so wait. Papa, I'm talking tonight. All the comrades are meeting me there. I'll meet you there, and I will drag you home through the streets by the braids. Papa, I promised. You heard it. Tonight you stay home or by the braids. Happy to meet you, Meir. Morris, Meir, whatever. Well, Morris, the thing is, I don't want to be your wife, and I don't want not to be your wife. That's a bit contradictory. I mean, women live so small, stuck in the kitchen. When outside, the world is calling on us to come change it for the better. Of course, for the better. I can't just make matzah balls. This year, in Pinsk, by the old church, Petlura stood the Jews up and shot them. Families that we knew. Goldie, things are very different here in Milwaukee. Here, we'll disappear. Marry you here, I'll disappear. Oh, Morris, the women there are plowing the land. Women where? In Palestine. Pioneers. New women. You want to go to Palestine? Yes. Yes, and not be just a parlor Zionist. And not marry Morris, me. I want to marry you. And go to Palestine. Goldie, here I can find work. A little flat. With a quiet wedding. Just a judge. No chuppah. Not religious.
No chuppah?
We are enlightened socialists, Mrs. Mabovich.
I will kill myself. No chuppah. In the dog catcher's office, maybe you'll get married. The Rebbe will spit me in the face. I'll leave the city.
Mama, there maybe won't be a wedding.
Good. Why are you doing this to me?
Goldie, dear revolutionary, if your papa won't allow you out to the street corner, Palestine isn't so near. Morris, I'm going to the street corner tonight. Goldie, I don't want to plow the land. The spirit, I respect. But human beings suffer. If they suffer in Jerusalem instead of Pinsk, is this better? I am not the happiest person alive. Two years later, we were married and living here in a kibbutz, where I was assigned to the kitchen making matzah balls. Beginning on my new life's work, the redemption of the human race. And ending here, 50 years later at that cabinet meeting. During a break, my assistant Lou comes in.
And how much poison am I to order, my dear lady?
Enough for both of us.
Ooh.
But we'll wait till next week. Because if Diane is right, next week there may not be a state of Israel at all. Or anything else. Israel, born 1948, died a little with each war since. 6,000 of us that first summer. 1 out of 100, fighting off 5 Arab armies. Of course, we didn't have to wait for wars to be killed. The year that I arrived, 1921, there were Arab riots and Jews were massacred. In Yafo, in Hebron, in Sfat, in Tveria. I went to a morgue where 8 dead boys from Hebrew University were laid out in a row on the floor. I couldn't stop looking at them. They still had stones in their hands. We intend to live. Our neighbors intend us to die. There's not much room for compromise. Why a state at all? so we don't have to defend ourselves with stones. All our idealism went into the making of a state. Look, for 2,000 years, no Jew has known what it felt like to have a state. And failure is not my story. I had a part in a great success here, where nothing was. Israel is. But Morris would ask, at what price? You, Morris, were part of the price. And for the total price, all the adding machines in the world wouldn't be enough. On October 8th, leading up to my cabinet meeting, every hour I'm drowning in these blood-soaked bulletins. In comes one of our religious ministers, Golda. I was visiting the wounded. Do you know a soldier named Mordecai Stern? I have no idea. Vodka. He was one of the Cyprus children. Of course. Give him my love. I'm sorry. Modka. Cyprus, 25 years ago. Always we were ruled by others. First, the Turks, who banished Jews from Palestine, so we fought with the British against them. Then we were ruled by the British, and in 1946, under a mandate, after Hitler on the island of Cyprus, the British ran a concentration camp for Jews to keep us from returning to Palestine and to be polite to the Arabs. Well, you know, all that oil. Jews, war refugees sailing to us by the thousands, were stopped mid-ocean and caged up on Cyprus, some 40,000, including children. At that time, I was working for the Jewish Agency, which was our unofficial government under the British. I negotiated with the British High Commissioner until at last he gave me a letter. And I went with that letter to Cyprus. The commandant there was to let me tour the camps. Huts and tents just thrown together on the bare, hot sand. There were watchtowers and guards with rifles. And the DPs, displaced persons in their rags, were pressed against all the barbed wire fences waiting to see me. There was a committee from each camp and a committee of the committees. I met with them. It's the winter that worries us most. We're afraid the children won't get through it. Now, the doctors have told us there's dysentery in the huts. Of course, no water. And that an epidemic is not out of the question.
So get us out of here.
I will, every last one of you, on the day that we have a state. And another woman said,
I am a next month's quota.
Do you have children?
No, it's my fond blessing.
Then it's you I've come to ask. Will you let a child go in your place?
But it's first in, first out.
The British will waive that if you do.
But I am 19 months here. I'm sick myself. Do you want me to die here?
Should I have said yes? And the chairman said, you will have to go to each hut. And so I did, all next day. Insult you, I won't. We cannot know what you've been through. And to one girl, who must have been pretty once, what camp were you in? Bergen-Belsen. And I looked at the number on her arm. I promise you, in Eretz Yisrael, everything is new, but it begins now. How? Let a child go in your place? So people who have waited 1 year for their quota stay, and somebody who came last week with a child leaves? Is that what you're asking us? That's what I'm asking you. And a knot of little children adopted me. told me their names. Good, good, you will be my bodyguards. And they led me between the huts. And in one, I ran into the chairman again. It's all we've been talking about since yesterday. I don't know. Maybe we'll disappoint you. And in the last hut, a woman said, "You've got my vote. I vote yes now. Go away." As I took her by the elbow, she said, "I killed my baby." And the woman next to her said, "She was hiding in the sewer with a group. The Nazis were above. The baby started crying, so she smothered it." Such stories. The detainees set up an outdoor meeting for me to talk at. And I said, "We will have a state. One day we'll have a state. You came from the DP camps, Germany, France. You remember how in every schoolroom there was always a map of Palestine. The children would learn its geography, sing its songs, and talk about arriving there. And the teacher said that without that map, the children would have lost hope. 15,000 children went into the death camp at Terezin. 100 came out. If we lose the children, we lose the future. We lose being a people. But here and now, lose these children and we lose these children. It's up to you." And the chairman said, "We'll vote, you wait somewhere." So I sat outside one of the huts with my little bodyguards, the smallest of whom, a boy, brought me, I don't know what, a fistful of scrap paper. Oh, a bouquet. And I smelled it. He said,
They're only paper.
"They're the realest flowers I have ever seen."
You could put perfume on them.
And then the chairman returned. They had voted. How? Yes. Yes. I knew you would. And then the small boy, before running off with his comrade, said,
I'm Motka.
"Vodka." Motka. And the Dybbuk said, "More life for all, more death for some." Such a twist of wrong, evil suffering. Why? Some rabbis say God's will. It's a question I asked the Pope. He said, man's will. Leaving the ladies out. Man's will. It is the origin of all evil. You Zionists force your will on the Arabs. The Arabs force their will on you. Neither is God's will, and suffering comes. I said, "You remind me of my husband." Well, I almost said it. But what the Pope called will, I call my Dybbuk. And yes, we willed this state into being. So, it's all my fault. The world. With help from a few others. Not Morris, though. He'd written me, "Did you ever stop to think that your Morris may lack the one attribute without which all the rest are worthless, namely, the indomitable will?" The Pope would have liked Morris. The children adored him. Oh. We had two, Menachem and Sarah, but not in the kibbutz. No. Morris wouldn't allow it. He wanted his family in private. He said the things that mattered to him had no place in the kibbutz. Me? I loved it. Oh, I was in charge of the poultry yard. I bred chickens. I was elected to the steering committee and went to planning conferences to listen all week to Ben-Gurion and others. I couldn't wait to tell Morris every word. He heard me out woodenly. I didn't really understand what he felt, that he was losing me to these others, including the chickens. Then he fell sick, malaria, for weeks. The doctors told me that staying in the kibbutz would ruin his health. So, we packed up and left for 2 small rooms in Jerusalem. That's where Menachem was born. In 1928, only months before our declaration of... Oh, I beg your pardon, no. In 1948, only months before our Declaration of Independence. I have 2 in my life. 1928 was merely personal. States cost money. Fundraising is something I know about. Well, as a teen, I was raising money on Milwaukee street corners. In 1948, the Jewish Agency held a meeting of its executive committee in secret. There, Ben-Gurion said,
I wake up in a sweat. The British will leave, the Arabs will attack, and we have nothing.
The Haganah is nothing?
Golda, do you know what the Haganah has cached away? Only 10,000 rifles against 5 armies. I don't sleep. What will become of us? The Arabs will throw us into the sea, just as they promise.
Why are the British leaving? They're sick of us too, for good reason. We've been fighting them at every turn. Begin and his militant Irgun, without our approval, blew up the King David Hotel, killing 90 people. After that, the British dumped us on the UN.
Tanks I can get in Czechoslovakia for 10 million. Ammunition, another 10. Not more than $6 million from American Jews. And don't count on it.
And so on and so forth until finally Ben-Gurion says,
I must go. Yes, to the Jews of the States.
Leave here now. Everything could fall apart. What you can do here, I can't. There, I haven't been in 10 years, but I speak a good American...
No, I must go myself.
BG, please. Put it to a vote. And the executive committee voted to send me. Ben-Gurion gave in.
All right then. Go at once, today.
Today? My coat is in Jerusalem.
Don't even go back to Jerusalem.
You want me to go to America naked?
Whatever helps.
So I flew out that day in the same dress. When I arrived in New York, I bought some clothes off the rack. S-Kleins, you got good bargains. And I learned that the Council of Jewish Federations was meeting in Chicago. Palestine wasn't even in their thoughts, but these men controlled the fundraising machinery of America for Jewish welfare hospitals, temples. I went to Chicago. There, the chairman in that hall said, "Friends, we have with us today an unexpected visitor from Palestine who has asked time for a few words. Mrs. What's your name?
Goldie Meyerson.
Goldie Meyerson." I have no speech. I'll tell you what's in my heart. 54 days ago, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine, an Arab state and a Jewish state. 33 nations for, 13 against. It wasn't the real vote. 6 million corpses crying out in the graveyard of Europe, cast the real vote. Now, I did not come to the States only to save 700,000 Jews after we have lost 6 million. But if the 700,000 in Palestine are killed off too, then we are through with the dream of a Jewish people. When the British pull out, 5 nations wait to massacre us. If we have arms to fight with, we will fight with them. If not, we will fight with stones. The question is, what can we get immediately? I don't mean next month, I mean now. You have 2 choices. We have only one. You cannot decide whether or not we will fight. We will. That decision is taken. You can decide only whether we will live. And don't be bitterly sorry 3 months from now for what you failed to do today. They were moved to the bottom of their pocketbooks. Hard-headed businessmen, such pledges of money we had never seen. And for the next 6 weeks, I spoke like that to Jews all over the country. And when I left, I'd raised $50 million.
$50 million?
Yes, for guns.
Golda, when history is written, it will say there was a Jewish woman got the money that made the state possible.
For guns. I begin with the redemption of the human race and end up in the munitions business. Yes. Simcha, you spoke with Kissinger. Where were the phantoms? Simcha, get the phantoms. Kissinger, a world power in person. He warned me.
First of all, I am an American. Secondly, I am Secretary of State of the United States. And lastly, I am a Jew.
That's fine. We read from right to left. This American wants Israel to come out on top. But he thinks it's good if we bleed a little first. By bleed, he means give back the land that the Arabs lost in the '67 war. By bleed, I mean this, that, and the other Israeli boy whose name I know. A dead boy doesn't bleed a little, he dies. We never wanted the fighting. In fact, 2 days before statehood, Ben Gurion sends me to Transjordan, begging for peace of King Abdullah. In secret, my guide Ezra dresses me in these long, baggy robes and a veil. I am to be a Muslim wife. We change cars twice before crossing the Jordan so as not to be followed. And in a third car, we are driven to a rich private house in Amman. 90 million Arabs surrounding us on their faces, praying for peace 5 times a day. And me in this Arab shmata. In comes Abdullah, very pale. I can't talk through a veil. Progressive, yes. You Jews have been so innovative in Palestine, bringing the swamps and deserts to life. Share your secrets with us. There's only one secret. For 2,000 years, pray next year in Jerusalem. Of course, only the Spirit makes the world fruitful. Work doesn't hurt. You know, it has been my belief that Allah scattered the Jews throughout the West, that they might bring its secrets back to us, since we are all the children of Shem In 5 days, it's war, and the children are going to murder each other. Are you breaking your promise to me? In the fall, you sent me a message. You are a Bedouin, and so a man of honor, and a king besides. You said a promise to a woman you would never break. That promise I made in November, before the UN vote to partition. Then I was alone. Now I am one of 5 nations and no longer master of my own destiny. My brothers of the Arab states see the Jews returning as Europeans, no longer Semites, but invaders. Yes, their view we have heard from our brother, the head of the Arab League.
This will be a war of extermination, a momentous massacre, like the Mongol massacre!
So it will be. But you can avert this disaster. I would love to. How? Do not proclaim your state. Why are you in such a hurry? 2,000 years I can hardly call a hurry. Wait one more. I will annex Palestine, not partitioned. I will merge it with Jordan, and after 1 year, Jews will sit in my parliament. As a minority, proportionally, I will treat you very well, protect you. Like the Germans? Look, for 50 years you have seen us here, fighting this stony land. There is not one Jew among us who has not given sweat or blood. But to once again sit in somebody else's parliament, it isn't what we dreamed. It is a dream. I offer you a compromise that is realizable. Bring me an answer by May 15th that I may take to my Arab brothers, and we can live in peace. Peace. Peace today, tomorrow, the ovens. I can answer you now. If it's war, we'll fight. And we'll win. Kenahara. The king sighed. It is your duty to fight. Well, is there anything more to be said? Only shalom. Salam. There is so narrow a difference in the way we say peace. How many bodies will we bury in this difference? A civilized man. And 2 years later, while he was praying on the Temple Mount, he was assassinated by his brothers. And if I'd accepted his offer, tempting to avert war. Women are not made for killing. We bring life into the world. Which I did also. Jerusalem, 1924. Menachem, 26. Sarala, 27, 28, my most miserable years. Not because of the children or even the poverty. Like all young parents, we gurgled over their cradle. We couldn't believe what we had created out of nothing. Morris said, "You call it nothing?" We lived in 2 small rooms, no heat or electric. I brought water in by pail from a rainwater cistern, and I cooked in a tin shack outside my kitchen, and had to bargain every time I went to the grocer with Morris's pay. Not cash, scrip, which shrunk in value by the minute. But I had left too much in the kibbutz. I ran back to it with just Menachem, 6 months old, to look for myself again. No peace of mind here either. Awful. I had to choose. My husband and child, or the life I came to Palestine for. I chose family. I went back to Jerusalem and to Morris. But in 1928, my Declaration of Independence. Morris came home on payday with a package, put on the gramophone. He'd brought his wind-up gramophone from America with records, played them in Tel Aviv, in the kibbutz, in Jerusalem. Today, I was paid in cash. So, being so suddenly a man of wealth, I was rounding up the children, hollering, "Menachem, Sarah, for the last time, get into bed," where at least they could keep warm. I bought something for the soul. Lo and behold, a silk lampshade. You like it? It's, beautiful. You don't like it? It's beautiful, it's beautiful. Oh, Goldie, please not now. That kerosene lamp is so ugly. Morris, I can do without that music. It's Bach, the cello suite. Morris, I almost killed a man today. Who? Turn the record off. He did. And he sat with the lampshade on his lap. Morris, I can't live the way I must. Tell me about the man almost killed. Nobody wants our script. You know that. 20 minutes I have to beg the butcher for half a pound of soup bones. And yesterday, the grocer wouldn't give me bread and margarine on credit. So today, these children go to bed hungry. And that grubber young next door is telling the milkman that he better watch out for us, that he won't get his money. Well, I picked up a stick and shouting at him, I hit him on the head. Was he hurt? Of course he was hurt. If he didn't run so good, he'd be in the gutter. And you buy us a silk lampshade. Show it to Sarah. She's got a sore throat. Who did I sound like? My mother. Goldie, how much can a bookkeeper make? And times are very bad in this paradise. Morris, it's not the money. I was furious already. I had just come back from the washing. So give it up. I was scrubbing the whole school's laundry on a washboard in the schoolyard for free tuition for Menachem and Sarah. I can't feed them. I'll pay the school. And it's not the work either. I worked even harder in the kibbutz. Oh, the blessed kibbutz. The worst mistake I ever made was to leave it. No, you made one before. What? You married me. Morris, I'm going back to my work for the party. I'll find a place to live in Tel Aviv. There's a worker's house on High Arkon. Goldie, I work in Jerusalem. You can come on weekends. No. No. Morris, today I made up my mind. Go then. But the children stay here. You'll take them to the office? You'll take them to the office? Yes, there I can hire help and there is a school. I see. You've got it all figured out, don't you, Goldie? Work, politics. 4 years I have given to 2 rooms here. The worst time of my life. What's my head full of? Bills I can't pay. Shoes are falling apart. Sarah's got a cough. My whole life is bargaining over 2 chicken legs. I'm in Milwaukee. Other people like me for the things you hate. And yes, I have a mind of my own. And what I came here for is an absolute necessity for me. I won't live without it. Goldie, I followed you all the way from Denver to this wasteland. And now you'll make me live alone here. You're letting me down, Goldie. Who let who down? Morris. Yes. Golda. It's like loving the Rock of Gibraltar. Well, I guess I'll just throw this out. I still hear that music. Menachem, who became the cellist his father wished he was, practiced it often on this very balcony. I have 2 balconies in my life. This one in Tel Aviv has a view of the sea. The view from my other balcony, Dimona, I'll get to. Well, in this flat, I didn't come home every night. Kagan always used to say, Golda Meir, the Earth Mother, you throw yourself on her bosom, next minute, you're dead. The last time somebody threw himself on my bosom, first, I'm too old to remember. And second, he didn't act dead. Look, I was no nun. And the leaders that I fell for, like Remez, the Union head, and Shazar, a firebrand, who became president, were no saints. They were exciting and powerful men, dedicated to the cause and to its women. Did I feel guilty towards Morris? No. It brought me alive in a way he didn't. Towards the children, yes, but it was my party work that took me away most. Relatives filled in, and Morris himself came down every weekend from Jerusalem to be with the children. He would transport them into a different world, not politics, his books. For a time, Morris was managing a bookstore in Jerusalem, and he would always come with a classic. I have brought for your entertainment a masterpiece, which I think you will both enjoy. And he'd read to them, here, on the balcony. In a certain village in La Mancha, there lived, not long since, one of those gentlemen, Don Quixote, another idealist. I said, Morris, what's wrong with ideals, which were my life? What's wrong with the actual world? Everything. I want our children to grow up in a world that is safe for Jews. And I want them to grow up with a mother. How do you feel, Goldie, when they're sick and need you, and you're not there? Like I was stealing their blood? Guilty. Guilty no matter what I did. To them, when I gave time to the cause, and to the cause when I gave time to the children. But the cause was my life. I have one dream that keeps coming back. Sarah's a tot, sickly. She's sitting alone with her doll, wailing.
My dolly's sick. I want Mama.
Then Menachem comes in and says,
She's in Haifa at a meeting.
Then Morris, coming in, says, what's the difficulty here?
Papa, there's nobody to carry my cello. Where's Mother?
She's in Geneva at a meeting. Then Sarala, all grown up now, comes in and says,
Papa, I didn't know you were still sitting here.
Just waiting to see your mother.
She's in New York.
At a meeting. And that's how he died. Sitting alone in my flat, waiting. I was in New York at a meeting. He was a beautiful soul, loved music, brought with him all those breakable old records. He loved language. He read Joyce, Proust, and Freud. He loved knowledge. He went partners with a friend to purchase the Encyclopedia Britannica, The Survivor to own the books. He died May 1951, only 3 years after we had proclaimed the state. Well, it doesn't keep Jews from dying. Yisgadal vayisgadash shemei rabo, bo'ulmo divro hirusei, yamlich malhusei, וחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלו ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. You're in a dark hall. Yad Vashem. The light in the floor is our eternal flame to the 6 million Hitler killed. Yad Vashem. It's from Isaiah. It means, I will give you a memorial and a name. We're still trying to collect each name. The Hall of Remembrance. It takes a minute before you see on the floor is writing. 22 names. Dachau, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, Babi Yar, Mauthausen, Belzec, Majdanek, Janowska, Brindonk, Sobibor, Ponare, Transnistria, Ravensbrück, Jasenovac, Kluga, Westerbork, Drancy, Stutthof, Theresienstadt, Buchenwald, Chelmno, Treblinka. Israel, stand here, and everything in it makes sense, even what I'm coming to at the bottom of the pot. Lo od. Never again. Never again. And outside, down the steps, for a few cents you can buy a very good knish. Because life goes on. And the war. Simcha, tell Kissinger we lost planes today like flies. Dado gives me here a new list. He needs tanks, spare parts, electronic mishmash. You'll have it in the morning. Simcha, listen to me. Half of this war is being fought by you. Such a thought frightens you? Good, let it. This state, its cost, its endless cost. The endless battles. And our fighting amongst ourselves. Oh. In 1948, our Declaration of Independence read, with trust in the Rock of Israel. And already we couldn't agree. The rabbis demanded we use the word God, and left wouldn't sign on to a God they didn't believe in. So Ben-Gurion had to spend half the day convincing everybody that the rock meant God or the people. And he was waiting to rush the scroll into a bank vault so that it would last, even if we didn't. From my window, I had seen 4 Egyptian Spitfires zoom in to bomb Tel Aviv. And in Washington, D.C., our courier could not deliver it to the White House until we had agreed, at least, on a name for the state. Judea, Zion, Israel. Then Ben-Gurion read out our Declaration of Independence, very matter-of-fact, until he came to the state will be open to the ingathering of exiles, when his voice broke. This was the absolute core of what we had worked for all this century. And when it was my turn to sign our Declaration of Independence, the man behind me said, "Why are you crying so, Golda?" If not then, when? And that's how, after 2,000 years of exile, we brought our state back into being. From my balcony, I have a view of the Mediterranean and of the ships arriving with our exiles, the refugees and survivors, coming home. From where? Europe, of course, from Africa, from Arabia, even China. Immigrants by the hundreds of thousands. In 2 years, we doubled our population. What did Israel mean to them? I knew. When I'd left Russia, 1906, there was a Tsar, and Jews were not allowed in Moscow. In 1948, shortly after the State of Israel was proclaimed, I was appointed our first ambassador to the Soviet Union. And as ambassador, I returned with 25 Jews. My legation. We lived together like a kibbutz. Shared the chores, no salaries. Everyone got equal pocket money. There were thousands of Jews now living in Moscow, but how to meet them? After 40 years, I didn't see. Because Zionism was a political crime against the state, and offenders were sent into Stalin's prison camps. Even our own relatives we were afraid to contact for their sake. My remnant of a family had disappeared in the war. Well, in the Moscow synagogue, only a handful of shabby old Jews would still come to pray. So, on Rosh Hashanah, our Jewish New Year, I said the whole legation should go. And we notified the rabbi. Word must have spread, because when we arrived that day in the street, we were mobbed by 50,000 Jews. Old men and women, teenagers, Red Army, soldiers, mothers with babies, everyone stretching out their hands and calling to me in Yiddish, Golda, Golda, Leben sollst du Golda. And when the rabbi saw our military attaché with the Star of David on his soldier's hat, he shrieked. And to those thousands and thousands of Jews, blowing me kisses, crying, I was so shaken. I couldn't think what to say. Only one miserable sentence. A Dank, ak was ihr seid geblieben Jiden. Thank you for remaining Jews. A sentence that passed through the crowd like a word from Isaiah. There was in the crowd a 12-year-old boy with a birthday camera took a picture. And for weeks, Jews on the street would whisper to one of us, I got the picture. And copies traveled everywhere. Why, in Siberia, a girl from Lithuania who had been sentenced to work in the lumber woods was at a fire, warming her chunk of frozen bread. She saw a man spying on her from among the trees. He said, Are you Jewish? She replied, Yes. And out of his rags, he took the torn picture and whispered, There is a Jewish state. There is a Jewish state. And that's what Israel meant to every Jew, from Yemen to Siberia. And now I'm Prime Minister presiding over its destruction? Kissinger. Simcha, Dado says we're running out of planes, tanks, ammunition. Look, I want to come to Washington myself and talk to Nixon. Why is that the last thing they'd want? It is not a provocation to the Soviets. What? I'll come incognito. I'll wear my Arab outfit. What does that mean? Nixon approves everything on our list in principle. The Pentagon has to locate civilian planes to charter? Ik ver me shugada. Where are the things? You call Kissinger back. I don't care if it's 1:30 in the morning. Wake him up. Does he know that the Soviets are airlifting to Damascus? Where are they chartering planes? From Eskimos? Oh, you're sleeping there. Everybody's sleeping there. Simka says he can't call anyone until dawn. And now I come to my other balcony. You go south, away from my view of the sea, into the Negev desert. Our desert is not sand, but broken rocks. A dry seabed of rubble as far as any eye can reach. Uninhabitable. Ben-Gurion said, go south, the Negev is our future. The Negev was our future because the Negev had uranium. It's where my daughter's kibbutz was raised out of the rubble. The nearest town is Beersheba, an age-old stop on the camel trade routes, famous for its well, which they say Abraham dug. The well we dug, not for water. It's 24 miles to the south, near a place called Dimona. In my autobiography, we don't mention Dimona. I gave Igal Alon a copy of My Life by Golda Meir, which I didn't write. Rena Samuel wrote it. I gave it to Igal because he'd given me a copy of his autobiography, which he didn't write. Rena Samuel wrote it. Rena didn't even ask, do we breathe the word Dimona? Of course not. It all began to take over my life when Ben-Gurion moved me from Minister of Labor to Foreign Minister. In 1956, he changed my name from Meyerson to Meir. In Hebrew means illuminate. And he sent me with his favorite boys, Perez and Dayan, to France to meet with its head of government. That week, it was Mollet, a fellow socialist who felt he owed us something. Well, indeed he did. Only 1 week earlier, Eisenhower had forced Britain and France and us back from the Suez Canal after Nasser had nationalized it. Ben-Gurion said, Eisenhower taught us something, that golf player. Trust nobody but ourselves. The French thought the same. That's why they were building their own nuclear reactor. And Mollet was very guilty that he had let us down on the battlefield. I owe the bomb to them. He told an aide, I owe them the bomb. And that's exactly what Ben-Gurion had sent us after. We signed an agreement with the French, and 18 months later, with their help, we were breaking ground for our own nuclear reactor at Dimona. We built it all underground. Well, the Americans were flying U-2s over it, and we had no intention of being vetoed by the great powers. They knew something was happening. Suddenly, the desert was fenced in, alive with bulldozers and cranes, new roads, hundreds of workers and their families, much too much housing. We said it was a desalination plant. For 10 years, day and night, the construction went on. Out of sight, in the hole we dug hundreds of feet down into the earth, level beneath level. And not just a nuclear reactor, but a plant where the uranium rods were reprocessed to get plutonium for warheads. Prime Minister, I didn't know how a car runs. And now we had hundreds of our top Israeli scientists working there. We bled our country. 5 underground levels with lead walls, workers in sealed suits, even robots, dangerous, don't touch, and everything overseen from a control room with an observation post. I was at this observation post so often, the men called it Golda's balcony. The view from this balcony is a view into hell. And I keep saying it all night as the cabinet talks, starting with Dado. 3 more days of fighting, and I will have nothing left to defend with. I tell the chief of the Air Force, I'm working on getting more planes from the Americans. God knows if I'll have pilots left to fly them. You see, we could kill Egyptian and Syrian soldiers 10 to 1, and they'd still outlast us. This is what Diane called the fall of the Third Temple. The state is now the Third Temple. So, we have our secret Demona staff on hand to tell us how many nuclear warheads, we call them temple weapons, how many we can have ready. In all, 25 for missile launchers and F-4s. For years we've labored, spent billions we needed elsewhere, only to build this arsenal. It was meant for nothing else but a new Masada, our last resort. And our first nuclear bomb has written on it, in Hebrew, never again. And now, not use it. I'm sick. I am physically sick. Can't eat. My stomach's empty, yet I'm vomiting. Dry retching. And what am I thinking? A mishmash of my driver, Jaime, when he drove me to be sworn in, and I sat with him in the front seat. Please, Mrs. Meir, sit in the big seat. This doesn't look nice. Why, Jaime? Because you're Prime Minister now. But I didn't do anything yet. Oh, I've done something now. My daughter Sarala, 1967, when we did strike first. I was with her the day before, knowing that the Egyptian army could strike back through her kibbutz, with her and my grandchildren in its path. I went back to Jerusalem without saying a word. Afterwards, Sarah came to me and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I couldn't tell everybody. How could I tell you? Does Israel always come first? My dream was simple. Make a new world. And in 1917-18, we were rid of the Kaiser and the Tsar. No more tyrants, only peace and socialism. And oh, like a young girl, this new century was such a beauty. Oh. And then, so much evil in her. Stalin, the Depression, Hitler, the war, the Holocaust, the atom bomb, our atom bomb. I started out to make this state a model for the redemption of the human race. And now I face wiping out cities full of good people I never met. I told school children, get involved with causes that are good for others. And I wanted power to do good. But this power, this choice, has everything I've done for the past 70 years made this inescapable? What happens when idealism becomes power? It kills. And to save a world you create. And this is the terrible question. How many worlds are you entitled to destroy? Tell me. Tell me. Tell me, my hypothetical friend, in the grain of this earth you put in good and evil, like two ends of a single stick, so nobody picks up one without the other. Why? Why? Top secret. I had no such questions 5 years ago. I was just sitting in my garden. I had retired. I worked for Israel every day since it was founded. And for 20 years before that, I wanted to sit down. This was in my small house in Tel Aviv. In the other half, Menachem and his family. I had dreamed of a paradise. Here it was. grandchildren, a backyard with swings, a slide, no toy guns. But toy trucks to trip over, and Gideon, their little driver, says,
Grandma, why are your legs different?
"Who says my legs are different?"
My eyes say one is fatter.
Maybe one of your eyes is fatter.
Oh, that's what the philosophers call the subject-object relationship.
He doesn't even come up to my hip, and 3 times a day I get an inferiority complex from him. Here. The 2 halves of my life come together. And I ache. I just ache for this simple paradise. Lost. I was drafted back. Look, my fat leg is phlebitis. I have arthritis, bouts of migraine headache, a heart condition, and my best kept secret is cancer. I have lymphoma. Somebody said I was a workhorse. Like Pavlov's dogs. You say the word duty and Golda salivates. She's got psychosomatic health. So I came back to this. And now I am faced with this terrible question. Do I arm the planes? Yes. The debate now is what to hit and when. I smoked 3 packs of cigarettes, and when the cabinet meeting breaks up, I phone Dinitz in Washington. Simcha, call Kissinger now. At 3 in the morning. Yes, wake him up. Tell him the resources to continue we don't have. I told him, Golda. I gave him the shopping list. And tell him we've gone on nuclear alert. What? Tell him our nuclear bombs are loaded and operational, and that we are targeting our neighbor's military headquarters. Tell him. I can hardly believe it myself. Am I walking in my sleep? Military headquarters means Cairo and Damascus. It means the obliteration of the millions living in those cities. Killed, maimed, burned, bleeding. And then, might the Soviets in reprisal bomb Tel Aviv. And the United States then bomb Moscow. And Moscow then bomb New York. Our little war is not taking place in a bottle. It's a piece of the Cold War for world control. I wait all day. The whole cabinet waits and long into the night for word from Kissinger, from Nixon. Kissinger is already juggling problems all over the world, and now here on his doorstep is a vision of doomsday dawning in Jerusalem. And in our eyes, too, and worst of all, the power is ours. And the choice. We all try to work as usual. As usual. We all think it may be the end of the world. So, Bar-Lev tells me what our Suez problem is. He says, the only way to break them up is to cross the canal. Dado says, we don't have the supplies. And the clock is ticking. The bombs are loaded onto our planes. Cross the canal. Cross the canal, how? We do have a bridge designed only for crossing the canal. It's portable, but it's 10 miles from the canal. It must be towed into the water tonight. At 8 a.m., Washington, D.C. Simcha and Kissinger meet at the White House. Simcha insists they be alone for my message, so the aides of both men are sent out of the room. No record exists of what was said there. Meanwhile, we sit. We sit through the night. We read magazines and newspapers. Lou brings in coffee. 2 of our ministers play chess. Where is the bridge? Broken down. The man won a prize for that bridge, and now it doesn't work. Are we winning, losing, killing, or dying? Nobody knows. And the clock is ticking. How long do I wait before I give the order to drop the bombs? Half a day? A day? Tomorrow? Yes. Simcha! Kissinger says hold on. Hold on. Hold off on the temple weapons. Then tell him to send us some help. He said help is on the way. Nixon said, forget the charters, use the C5 Galaxies today. They're turning the depots inside out. In the United States and in Europe, they'll replace everything we've lost. 14 Phantoms by the weekend. And the C5 Galaxies are airborne, a fleet of them. London and Paris won't let them land. The Arabs wouldn't like it. They'll be refueling in mid-air. And now, the Egyptians do come out from under their umbrella and we throw everything we've still got at them. Kissinger says
Israel has stepped up its consumption of material as we intended.
yes, in the biggest tank battle since Stalingrad. And we do cross the canal. Not with the bridge, no. Lou wakes me up on the couch. Sharon is across. Sharon is across. On the bridge? No, on rafts. He said through the bridge. Sharon, a son of a bitch, but what a fighter. And on Sunday, the airlift comes in. Oh, how those planes come in like a flock of monsters. Huge, beautiful monsters. Every half hour, bringing us tanks, ammunition, medical supplies, rockets. I go down to Lod Airport to watch them land. I can't control myself. I kiss the pilots. It may not be the thrill of their lives, but it was the thrill of mine. And then we unload our nuclear bombs. And it's like the whole world off my back. Then Dardo phones from the Sinai. It's all right, Golda. We're back to being ourselves. And so are they. And we widen the bridgehead behind them, cutting off the Egyptian army on our side of the canal. Without ammunition, without food, without water. And the road to Cairo is open. That day, I speak to the Knesset. At this hour, our forces are operating on the west bank of the canal. The tide has turned. I can't say more. There is still fighting to be done. Yes, there's still fighting to be done. Is that news? And then, to keep us from overrunning Egypt, where does Kissinger go? Moscow. Kissinger flies to Moscow. Kosygin flies to Cairo. And they arrange a ceasefire to keep the Cold War cold. Then, Kissinger comes to Jerusalem and in private says to me,
You blackmailed us.
Are you sure? Only blackmail.
I don't know.
You'll never know. I hope.
I hope.
We need to leave wars aside. No joy in killing. No joy in shooting. No joy in winning wars. Because the winner also pays. I resigned in the spring. Well, I'd always said the cruelest thing I had to do was send boys to die. But if I couldn't do it, get out. Get someone who could. And that goes for the temple weapons as well. When the day comes when we end all differences with our Arab neighbors. And I am convinced that day will come. There is one thing I would say to our Arab neighbors. I forgive you for killing Israelis. More difficult to forgive is why you have forced our sons to kill. About the temple weapons, I still cannot answer my own question. 75 years ago, in Kiev, my father nailed boards across a door to keep out a pogrom. And to come in one lifetime, all the way from the sound of that hammer to life in a state of our own, where we can take in every brother and sister in the world who wants to come home. What more can a Jew ask? It's a promise. Yes, written in the Torah to homeless people. You will find your way home again. And I mean all people, including our neighbors. Including our neighbors who want a state too. There is no question that cannot be settled if you grant us one right to exist here. Well, the temple needs younger blood. I could use a little myself these days. One last word. The best. Shalom. 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 Shalom.